and welcome to episode 152 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is July 27th, and together with Robert and Goran, we're here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
So we released Bing Chat Enterprise at Inspire last week or the week before that. And one of the key reasons for releasing this Enterprise edition was data protection and privacy. So when customers are using Azure OpenAI services in the context of the SAP Business Technology Platform, you might also be interested how you can connect and consume Azure OpenAI services in a secure way. And that's exactly where SAP Private Link Service comes in. Today, Harut and Martin join us today to talk about one of the latest services that is now supported with SAP Private Link Services, Azure OpenAI. But before we hand over to them, as always, let's quickly take a look at the news or some of the news from this week. And Goran, we start with infrastructure-related topics again.
From bottom to the up.
Yes.
Yeah, so interesting announcement or crash consistent VM restore public preview feature. What is the restore point? Restore point is basically we can take a snapshots, of the disk, which are kind of used in a different scenario like backup restore or maybe Azure Site Recovery as well. We have two options of crash consistent, meaning non-application specific, or it's not an application consistent, which is typically very often bound to the databases. Now, when it's about the crash consistent part, generally we only supported like one disk, one disk at a time, which meaning it was difficult to do for the whole VM. So to say, at the same time, you need to do one after another, and then you are not at the same time. Now here is the point that we have a crash consistent for all the disks or in the same time per VM. So very nice. Feature. I can imagine definitely it could be used in a different SAP scenarios as well. Customer needs to register for the public preview in order to test it. But definitely, I would strongly recommend it, to customer, even partners, so to say, even to try it. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. The next,
Agentless is always nice, right?
Agentless is always nice. Exactly, that's a good point. It's Agentless. It's not related to the version of the operating system as well. There are a few kind of interesting beneficial, but Agentless is always a good stuff because we can do this because it's not an application specific. It's a crash consistent, so it's done obviously it's from the outside, right? Yeah, but nice stuff. Yeah. The next, what I found kind of interesting, I'm not sure if that would work for the SAP, but kind of preview of the Azure migration of the Windows servers. So from the on-premises on the VMware, we have an ability to migrate with the Azure Migrate option to the Azure. Now here is actually added a feature that during the migration, you're doing also a Windows upgrade. So if you go a bit down, there are kind of screenshot or some screenshots. Basically, I think it's somewhere mentioned. Yeah, here. So basically, let's say, okay, current version is Windows 26, and then you are kind of choosing a higher version, Windows 2090 on 2022, right? It's being claimed that all the internal settings are being preserved. Okay. But
would you do this in an SAP environment? Probably not.
Yeah, well, right? Only after
no risk, no fun.
No risk, no fun, and a lot of testing, of course. A lot of testing is needed, but it's kind of interesting stuff because sometimes, generally, I'm thinking, definitely it could be useful because customers generally are advised to go to the higher version of the operating system in order to minimize the later also upgrades, and generally new OS versions gets a new features. So I'm not sure if that would work with the SAP. It's just about this testing, but definitely a value add-on. Yeah, customer can test it.
Cool.
All right.
Good. Then we move up the stack, basically. We briefly talked about this already. With Azure API Management, we now have the capability to also import OData services. So here's the official documentation that talks about this. But even more important, and that was just published after our show last time, Martin here published another really cool blog post on using these OData services with Azure API Management. And maybe Martin, you instead of me talking about the blog post, maybe you can spend a few seconds on this one, what the scenario is or what the starting point is.
Basically, it's about making it easier to consume from the Azure services, right? And that's why there's the GraphQL sample, for instance, where you can mesh up multiple APIs, even SAP plus non-SAP, but serve it from one single endpoint, which makes it easier for developers to take care of the lifecycle as well as of the integration efforts, for instance. And that's one of the many options. And I'd like to highlight there the SAP Cloud SDK repo, where we're using what's distributed for the BTP channels, SAP's Cloud SDK for JavaScript, and run that on the app service to have like the best of both worlds. SAP's knowledge about the semantics of the OData services that they provide, but the hosting as well as the integration part from our platform. Mm-hmm. And also on the docs, you went over there already, we have a second entry for that is SAP specific. So if you go to the past link from the Microsoft docs, on the left, so you came from the docs where you were showing the import.
Oh, here, yeah, sorry, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on the left, on the table of content, there's the next one, import SAP OData metadata. Mm-hmm. In here, we have like a section where we describe how to do this with OpenAPI and also with the new OData stuff. Yeah, so to consolidate the SAP specifics in one place.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's for me one of the most important features that we just released in Azure API Management from an SAP context since a long time, I would say, because now obviously on the SAP side there are a lot of OData services, and now with Azure OpenAI Management you can also really consume these SAP OData services and obviously make them then available via Azure API Management to other Azure services. So I think that's really something that will help a lot of customers in their journey. Good, then one last topic that I quickly want to mention that was recently published, and that's a really nice end-to-end demo, basically, that talks about an SAP breach and how Microsoft Sentinel can be used with all the connectors and integrations that we have with the SAP world or in the SAP system, how such an investigation could look like. It's just it's a 4-minute video or something like that, and it's a nice story where they talk about how such a breach could be detected and what you can do with this. So I would definitely recommend to spend these 4 minutes to just watch the video.
And to me, the craziest thing, Holger, is that from the attack pattern, because attackers like to do things a certain way, we can already identify which group this is, from which part of the world they're attacking you. And they have even labels. They have like nicknames, how they are like reflect
the different hacking groups. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Good. With this, that was all, as said, very, very brief this week. So with this, maybe we can hand over to our guests. I mean, Martin will come to you in a second, but Harut, maybe before we go into the topic of today, maybe you can quickly introduce yourself. You are from SAP. What are you doing at SAP? And then we can take it from there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Holger. Thank you, Goran, for invitation. Very excited to be guest on your YouTube channel. My name is Harutyun Ter-Minasyan. I'm a solution expert on business technology platform and working in a unit of platform adoption and advisory, where we are building different reference architectures and use cases around business technology platform and validating that with the customers. So basically driving the adoption of the BTP. And I think my collaboration with you guys, with Microsoft, is kind of going back to 2020-21, where we worked together on our joint Microsoft and SAP reference architectures in the context of Embrace initiative program, right?
Yes.
And we had like some success open SAP course where we very closely worked on it. And but the collaboration, I think, not ended there, which is very great. So I think until now we are very strongly working with you guys on different topics. And yeah, I mean, Martin, so is my sparring partner from Microsoft side from the SAP Private Link Service. That's why that's what we're going to share today, right? And since the announcement of the service, we both were very closely working together to identify some use cases, to create some references, make awareness, publish a lot of blog posts, and try to help customers to adopt this great service. And I think today we will give you some updates, what happened since I think it's almost a year since last session, right, on your channel about the private link. Maybe there happened some stuff, so we'll likely share with Martin some of those changes, and at the end we have some exciting demo and a short proof of concept that we would like to share with you around generative AI. So maybe I can start sharing my screen.
Perfect. Yes.
Yeah, so I will take it from here then. Yeah, so I'm Martin Pankraz, been on the channel a couple of times before, and I'm in the same team as Holger, and we are basically looking at SAP as our engineering partner. That's how I also got into contact with Harut, which I'm very glad that happened, because it's not only fun in terms of topics, but also like just great to work with knowledgeable colleagues like Harut and the SAP side. And this is one of the outcomes of our partnership, where SAP was enabled to develop such a service for BTP, and we drive common scenarios. And since we had a session with Sven at the beginning of the year, there were a couple of more services released. So basically almost everything that is here on 2023 going after February. So we had machine learning, the storage account, which was a very hot topic. We had many customers asking that, and there's also like a nice success story that I published with one of the customers that we'll show in a second. And Azure Cognitive Services, Form Recognizer, and OpenAI are top of mind, obviously. So we had one customer in the biotechnology sector who's like working on patient data, for instance, with the Form Recognizer. That was nice to see. And for the cognitive services, we are you get the whole portfolio of the capabilities there.
That's really great to see this list growing and growing, basically. And I know from really also from customer demand that as you said, customers are asking for these services because they want to leverage BTP, they want to leverage Azure services, but they want to do this in an even more secure way, so to say. And it's really great that we see this list is growing and growing.
Exactly, and from here we are going to do a deep dive on the OpenAI part, where Harut and I worked on a prototype that we want to put into a nice blog post again. But you will see today like an early preview of the working version of the prototype before you get the structured stuff, how to reproduce all of this.
You saw it first here.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you want to go on to the next section, Harut?
Yes, thank you very much, Martin. And as you said, Holger, it's really good to see more and more customers showing interest and adopting this, and also based on their demands, right? The services are growing, which is fantastic. And one of such success stories we had back in April, where we worked with FrieslandCampina together, Microsoft, FrieslandCampina, SAP, to also adopt the private link service. So basically, FrieslandCampina is using many Microsoft and SAP solutions. For instance, the integration suites, they have a large number of business critical integrations running on the integration suites, and integrating with some of the Microsoft services and solutions, also some of the lines of areas or critical areas for them, like finance, procurement, etc. And the requirement basically from their side was mainly security related, because before adopting the private link, they were mainly using the IP whitelisting on the service side to the BTP services, which is, of course, was working for them, but it was also bringing some limitations and challenges, and and they wanted to avoid all of these challenges, and they asked us to support them using the private link service, and that's exactly where we, with Martin and our other colleagues, supported to integrate that. And basically, as you can see, the main scenario for them was using the Azure Blob storage. And they were using a lot of unstructured data on the blob storage, and this was running on the integration flows in the integration suite. And we can say we completely disabled, let's say, the entire internet access to the blob storage, and but the data still could be written from the blob storage via private link only from the BTP, right? So, and with that, I think we
maybe just one question. I mean, that's great for the security, of course, because it's just internal and much easier. But generally, I would expect also some improvements on performance as well. Did you see any improvements here, or? I mean, depends on the number of data as well, yeah.
Yeah, that's for this particular case, we're not having too heavy data. Correct me, Martin, if I'm wrong. That's why we couldn't see really big difference, but you're absolutely right. For the large amount of data, so of course, security is one point, but also performance is very important, and I think we can see for the large amount of data also some performance improvement.
Yeah. Makes
Well,
sense.
we checked with some like peak loads because this is a mission critical integration for them. So if this fails, they get challenges with their production lines. Yeah? So that's why this needed to be really like solid. Yeah? And it was verified if peaks in writing in like large gigabytes also work, and that was signed off. That's why they moved to production with this, which was like one of the best outcomes to me. Yeah? So Harut and team like advised on how to do this, and they like made the move over like a weekend downtime planned maintenance window and switched to the private link for this, and the testing was good, and we haven't heard about any challenges since then. Yeah? So all good.
Fantastic.
Exactly. So I hope we will work further, Martin, and we will maybe have further more such success stories around this topic. So. And with this, I would say we can move to the next topic, which Martin, you published also end of April, right?
Exactly, yeah. So at that time, I'm also wearing the recap shirt today. Yeah, I wanted to bring it up again because this is another option how to consume from the CAP world through the private link, the Azure services. And in here, we had recently the Cosmos DB hackathon, where we were providing the NoSQL API interface. But if you're not there yet, that doesn't mean you cannot consume, because it's possible to have the OData like layer on top of it. So any Azure service that doesn't have an OData interface, you can like expose this way. And the proxy that is mentioned in this repo and is hosted on GitHub supports Azure Blob and Cosmos DB. And that's like another option through private link to enable those services.
Nice, and it's really nice how this concept of the private link connectivity, so the secure connectivity between BTP. So, I mean, BTP needs to run on Azure, your SAP system needs to run on Azure, or the services needs to run on Azure. And then you can have this private link connectivity without exposing data to the internet. Yeah, and it's not only applicable for these standard service, but you can really have a much broader usage of scenarios here. So that's a really nice use case.
Exactly, yeah. And from here, the wait is now over. We are going to head into Azure OpenAI next.
It's time to switch to AI. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So I think after the service was enabled, the Azure OpenAI for the private link, Martin and I had a call where we were thinking what we can build, some good use case that we can demonstrate the service there. And yeah, luckily at that time, I think I was having something at look at the SAP Audit-Log service for some information. And then I realized that, of course, like all these logs, as you know, and every developer will prove it, right? So, I mean, they are not that much user-friendly. Reading logs might be very challenging. So it has not a structured way. It's hard to read. It's hard to find the right information there, right? So it's basically a time-based list with a JSON file, which has a lot of information. And to find the right source of information, what you're looking might be very time-consuming and challenging. And we were like, actually, this would be really good to analyze, take some of these results from the audit log, which obviously the BTP is generating during the usage, right? So everything is happening, especially security-related stuff, are audited and logged in the service. And then Martin and I said, okay, let's start first with a small proof of concept. Later we can think about something bigger. But within the proof of concept, we said without doing any direct integration with the service, let's just get some data from the audit log and feed it in a small PostgreSQL database. And on top of that, we built the CAP application using the latest Postgres package provided by CAP, right? And we were just with the CAP, we're reading the information from the database about these logs and also connecting to the Azure OpenAI, right? I mean, and the idea was that let's play a little with the prompt engineering with these log entries and come up with the idea that we can provide a summary of each log in a more human readable and understandable way that it's less time consuming. Everyone can understand what is written. We can directly identify if it was any thread or not. And also if you provide a large amount of chained logs, right, it can also improve to have a good quality outcomes for the logs. And we said, okay, one hand side, we can for each entry, and also it will be great that, let's say, at the end of the day, the administrator of the system will receive an email with the summary, for example, what happened that day, right? So in a short, summarized, crisp way, without spending much time and having a look in the audit service. And exactly what we did that. So we built this proof of concept and the connectivity, again, we'll see that it's via private link. And first thing, what we did was to, as I mentioned, to do some prompt engineering. So, and the Azure is providing a great playground for it. So here was our first starting point, because if we have a good prompt, I think the rest of engineering stuff are pretty straightforward. And we came up, did a lot of testing. This you can see here. This is basically like the typical log, how it looks like. And we came up at the end with some system messages and with some prompts in the, I would say, pretty much good results. Of course, if we have later like more data providing more chain summaries, providing that the results will be more accurate, right? And after having all these tests, actually was the doing or building the application part, which I would like to show you. And on top of CAP, we built like a small UI component, and this is how usually today the audit logs look like, right? If you go to the audit log service from the BTP in a very similar format, you will see maybe the JSON a little bit nicer formatted than here, but still you can see like it's quite challenging to read and understand what happened there. So
all the information is there, but very hard to read. Yeah,
exactly.
And now, before we go there, imagine you have like many tenants, you have many sub accounts, yeah, and you have hundreds of people using them. You get flooded with those messages, and I'm sure that the SAP team has like a roadmap for this as well, yeah. So they're probably working on something in this regard, but nevertheless, we wanted to use this sample to motivate what you would do with it. Yeah.
Yep.
And maybe let's pick up one example here, right? Of course, my session was timed out.
Always happens with preparation for the recordings. Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, the malware stuff. This is a standard alert that SAP provides. Yeah? There's like a test file for malware that you can put into your Business Application Studio. This will then trigger this, yeah? So it's not like made up or anything. Malware infected dev spaces is an alert that SAP offers. Yeah?
And exactly that's what we did, I think, just to simulate that there is also some critical threat in the system, right? So on the Business Application Studio, as Martin said, this malware service, and then we kind of simulated a small malware on command line, and of course the service detected it and put it on the logs. And we can see here the unstructured way of it, and this is the outcome after the our Azure OpenAI, right? And then we can see that it's clear to read the audit log entry indicates that there is a security threat on the dev space. It's giving the space name in the BTP instance, and specifically it states that the dev space is infected with malware. The poses a risk to security of the system and must be remediated immediately to prevent further damages. Right. So
really cool. Yeah. So out of this very structured, very technical information from the audit log, Azure OpenAI was able to create a very meaningful text, basically.
Exactly. This was one example. Maybe let's go back and pick up the second scenario, which is I think the other two were not so critical ones. Let's take this one, for example.
There was a login from a strange IP, I think, something like that.
Yeah. And then here, the provided log entry contains info level related to some issuance of the token. There is mentioning which token is that, and then the entry alone does not indicate any security threat, but evaluating logs, even the isolation is not sufficient to prepare any security threats. Basically it says, it can recognize this is not critical. And I think this is already great. If someone can have a look at that one sentence, that is already enough to not spend much time to have a look on this, right?
But I like the comment there. It says you should look at more logs in correlation. Yeah, that's also what we do with our security portfolio always. See if a login event that in itself is not suspicious becomes suspicious with timing and like place. Yeah, interesting that the GPT already tells you that. Yeah, you should look at more entries in conjunction. Yeah?
Exactly. And I think that would be even better what we have seen in this diagram we're showing. Like, imagine at the end of the day, going through all the list of the logs. I think Martin will give an outlook in a minute, but we can make a summary out of it and send us an email. I think that would be really good. This is something we would like to try, or we've started to try, and this will be part of our joint blog post with Martin. Exactly. Maybe before we go to have the outlook how we can improve this, Martin, I can also quickly show the like how we did it, right? I can show a little bit in the source code. So it's basically a typical, I mentioned the CAP application where we use the latest Postgres package for it, and of course also the OpenAI, the client here to make the calls to the Azure OpenAI, and basically what we played on the playground, right? All the system information and the prompts, what we are getting from JSON, we are basically providing it here. The private link part, I can show you how we configured. So we have created a private link service and we bound it to the our CAP application here, and you can see that we are getting the host name, which is bound exactly to this space and application. And if I go to my Azure account, you can see that the same host name or endpoint for my Azure AI I will find also there, which is good. So what we can do right now, just for fun, to test it, how it works, if it's really going private link or not. So let us quickly to check it here and do NS lookup on this endpoint, right? This is from my local machine. And you can see that it will resolve to a public IP address, right? So this is going via public internet from my endpoint. Basically all other, whenever I use this endpoint or my instance on Azure from anywhere else, it's going via public. And then what we can do now, I can just try to open the container of my application on the BTP, right? So right now on my Cloud Foundry application inside this application container, and I can do the NS lookup for the same instance from here, right?
Yeah.
And then this is, you can see this time it resolves into a private IP address, which means from our space, then we are connecting to the Azure OpenAI via private link.
That's a good point there, Harut. Maybe you can go back to the portal so that we can actually match what the drawing showed before. When you go here to the networking tab on the left, on the resource management, you have still configured all networks for this instance. Here's the private endpoint. Yes, we're talking privately to this resource, but it's still available on the internet. And if you choose the firewalls and virtual networks pane, here you can also select the network and like put it into your private VNet, which then like shows the scope that we had on the drawing.
So that I want to really make sure.
So I mean, we were not wanting to disable all other colleagues on working on this. That's why we allowed from all other networks as well, right? But exactly, Martin. So we can completely restrict or disable the other access, and then we will have only via private endpoints. Right?
Yeah, and it's like the biggest difference to ChatGPT. Yeah, so I want to emphasize this point. The GPT model is offered in both places. Yeah? In ChatGPT publicly, where all your interaction like feeds the public model, but in Azure OpenAI service, this is not only connectivity-wise private, but also the data that you feed in there or that you process there. Yeah? So it's all in your realm and it stays in your region. Yeah? So that's the only like enterprise grade offering to do this for the GPT interaction, so to say, for large language models. No?
Cool.
Okay.
Great. No, I think that's a fantastic integration there already to really connect this in a private and secure way from BTP to Azure OpenAI. Nice.
All right. So then
maybe Martin, you want to give a little bit overview what we are planning to do later?
Yes. So in the example, you saw one log entry being sent and summarized. Yeah? But in a production grade scenario, you would want to like process like many months of this, or maybe even years. And at that point, you will deal with the token limits. You cannot send very large documents to the Azure OpenAI service as is. You need to have some sort of mechanism to break them up. And here, on our docs, we describe two patterns from the Azure OpenAI service. One of them is parallel processing, where you send, let's say, 6 weeks of Auditlog in parallel, and in the end, you combine them. Or the second one, which I prefer because the log might influence each other, where you send the result of your summarization to the next summary process. So at that end, each request has seen the responses of the other services, and at that point you will have a more influential result in the summary. So you can imagine now you can even pass multiple years with this process. Mm-hmm. And the second one, if you want to go into a different approach where you reduce the result set beforehand. So imagine the audit log is represented as JSON, put that into a blob file, and in there only select the ones relevant to you. So you're saying, I'm looking for malware, for instance. So you will ask this question to the Azure Cognitive Search, which then identifies which entries in your audit log are likely to fit that pattern. And then you only send that result set to the Azure OpenAI service. So you're not like sending it everything and then go figure it out, but really reduce it beforehand, which has a risk that you might like deselect something that you wanted. So there's always like a fine line to navigate and also to tune so that you get the best results. But those are the three approaches that I wanted to show how to deal with such a large JSON output as from the SAP Auditlog.
Because right now you're just putting the Auditlog information in the user prompt actually, and obviously that is very limited depending on the token size and the model that you're using and so on. But here with this new capability actually of using Azure Blob storage and Azure Cognitive Services to pre-process basically the information, that's where you could really work with much bigger data sets.
Yes, that's a pattern that we see with like knowledge base integrations where customers are looking to make their intranet or their SharePoint, where they store all sorts of knowledge, more available. First, go with the cognitive search to identify the most relevant documents and only process them instead of taking everything.
Yeah.
Cool. And this is a scenario that we're going to extend for Devtoberfest. So everyone is watching this and is SAP savvy and want to participate in that session. So you will have Private Link plus this fully blown scenario for you to reproduce and enjoy at the Devtoberfest.
Perfect. Good.
All right.
Good. I think that's a really great outlook. So that now we teased a very nice scenario basically. So we saw it working. That's also good. So it's not just slideware. So thanks for that. And then with the outlook that at some point in time you will also be able to really run through this by yourselves and you test it out as part of the Devtoberfest. Cool.
I think the timing is in October. Let me quickly check which date was shortlisted. I think it's the 4th. It is, yeah. So 4th of October. Yeah, mark that as the day you
Block
need to
the calendar. Yes.
Yes. You need to attend the session that Harut and I are going to run on that day.
Fantastic.
Super. Good. And you showed that the internal private link, it's used productively, it's not just PowerPoints, but are really used in a productive scenarios for customer with a scenario which they consider as a business critical, right? So
yes, so FrieslandCampina really need to make sure that this doesn't break, otherwise
exactly.
they are in deep trouble.
Yeah.
Really looking forward to do more of these things with you, Harut. It's always nice to work with you on those things.
Always scenarios. Nice working with you, Martin.
Oh, perfect. Then we all will look forward to additional things that both of you will create and submit. For now, thanks very much for joining us, Harut. And yeah, I'm sure I'll see you or will see you again on the podcast to talk about some nice integration scenarios.
Yeah, the team has
Thank
more
you very
things
much. Thanks all.
The team has more on the backlog, so there's we just need to make sure we get the approvals to tell the rest of the world about it too.
We'll get there.
Yeah. Thank
Perfect.
you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.